Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. I'm Dr. Yamonja Smalls, Director of Professional Development for the Maryland Departments of Health, Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to today's Rate Review Advisory Group meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar: by computer and phone. If you look at the panel interface on your right labeled audio, you can click either computer or phone to switch for the best option. We will be recording today's webinar and posting on this session on YouTube and the DDA website. Today's PowerPoint will also be uploaded as an attachment and will be available for you to download in the webinar panel box along with today's agenda. RAG members, if you have a question, please type question in the chat box in the webinar panel as shown here and send it to me by selecting Organizer Y Smalls and press send. You will be unmuted so that you can ask your question. Questions from all other attendees may be entered into the question box in your webinar panel on the right, and the team will review and respond during the public comment portion of the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce Deputy Secretary Marlena Hutchinson to begin today's meeting. Good afternoon, Marlena.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you again for joining today's RAG meeting. Again, today is May 28th, 2024, and this is our fourth Rate Review Advisory Group meeting. We are looking forward to some pretty exciting dialogue with you all this afternoon. Next slide. Today's agenda starts with the approval of the April minutes, a review of the BLS wages, followed by an update on the general ledger supplemental template. We'll also give a few updates on the general ledger template and acuity. Finally, we'll have an open discussion before closing. I'll now turn it over to Jennifer for the review and approval of April's minutes. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Members were sent an email with meeting minutes on May 22nd. As co-chair, I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Would a member like to second?
I second, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. Any discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the minutes for the April meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, then the minutes are approved. Thank you. And I will turn it over to Caleb to start our discussion of the BLS wages.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caleb Levon. I'm an economist and senior manager for Optimus. I'm assisting DDA on their rate review for the fiscal year 26 cycle. I'm going to be talking about two related topics today: wage trending and wage rebasing. Both are used in the rate model. So wage trending, next slide, please. Wage trending is the annual process where DDA updates the wage estimates used in the rate model. The BRIC model for rates uses the wage rate as the building block to estimate the other service expenses. So when the wage rate is trended each year, the BRIC model adjusts the other components of the rate to capture those other changes in expenses. The wage trend is the estimate of the annual change in wages, usually up, but that's not always that's not a law of gravity. The wages can go up or down. Each cycle, we estimate that wage trend between when the wage data was collected and the cycle in which the services will be provided. Next slide. To estimate wage trends, we use inflation as a proxy. DDA has decided to use the Consumer Price Index, CPI, as a proxy for those wage trends. This has the advantage of being familiar to everyone. It's well researched and understood. There are a number of good forecasts for future CPIs, which is important for trending forward. We will be using the CPI-U, which is a particular type of CPI. It's the headline number that you would see in the news. That's the most common number. This graph here shows the monthly value for the CPI-U, or inflation, over the previous several years. The blue line is that estimate for the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. The orange line is the average of the monthly values for each calendar year. We can see that the average inflation for the period before COVID was between 2 and 3%. And then there was that period right when COVID started that it dipped down, but immediately started to grow back up. It really reached its peak during the calendar year 2022 before dropping back down again. And lately it's been about 3.4% in the last couple of months. So that is what the inflation number has been doing over this period. Next slide. So DDA has decided on a process for estimating the wage trend each year. Remember, we need to estimate that wage trend between when the wage data was collected and the rate cycle in which the service is provided. I'll talk more about the wage data next, but the most recent data available is for the calendar year 2023. The process developed and approved by DDA will use the actual and forecasted CPI-U to estimate the wage trend. For the forecasted portion, and that would be from fiscal year 24 to 25 and from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26, we are going to use the median estimate of accepted external CPI-U forecasts. So I'm not personally forecasting. We will use other well-known forecasts for the CPI-U. Next slide. So here's some actual data. So for the fiscal year 26 rates, we must trend the wage data collected by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the calendar year 2023 forward to the fiscal year 2026. That amounts to 2.5 years of inflation. We estimate the 6-month jump from calendar year 23 to fiscal year 24 using the most recent CPI-U data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That estimates the 6 months of inflation. That's the green number in the table. So that's actual measured inflation. For the next 2 years, we use the median estimate of several CPI-U forecasts. Those include the Congressional Budget Office, the Survey of Professional Forecasters, and there's an econometric model made by the Fed called Nowcast. So the median forecast for the next 2 years is roughly 2.5% annually. That combined with the 6-month value amounts to a total of about 6.5% or 6.47 to be more precise. That's the blue box there. That is the estimated wage trend from the most recent wage data in calendar year 23 to the fiscal year 26. So this is the process that DDA has settled upon for doing wage trends. This is the process they intend to use going forward. Next slide. As I've mentioned, DDA has also decided to update the base wages used in the rate model. So related but separate, rebasing the wages. So they've decided to update that base wage to the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics wage data. Those wages, which are different, they can be different for the geographic region or the rest of state. And currently they're using data from 2018 for all services except meaningful day, except for most meaningful day services, which were updated to the 2021 BLS data. So there are some services that use 2018 wage data and a small number in the meaningful day category that use 2021 data. So updating, so for the 25 rates, so for the previous cycle last year, we used those wages and we trended them forward with a combination of CPI and COLA. And there was some discussion last year about that. By updating the base wages from 2018 to 2023, not only are we updating the wages to more recent values, but we're also reducing the amount of wage trending that is necessary. So we're not having to estimate this trend from 2018, but only from 2023. Let me give you an example on the next slide. So here we're showing the wages for social and human service assistants. This is occupation code as formulated by the BLS that's used for a number of services. This is at the 50th percentile. Some of these services use 75th or even 90th percentile wages. And this is in the geographic differential, that is the Washington, D.C. metro area, the 6 counties in that area. Each of those, the wages will, this graph will look different for each of those different categories, at different percentiles for different occupation codes, and whether it's rest of state or the geographic differential, you'll have a different set of lines. But this, we'll use this as an example. In this case, the blue line is the actual wages. And you'll note that this graph doesn't start at 0. This has been blown up to emphasize the variation here. So we've zoomed in on the graph to show the variation. The blue line is the actual wages as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The orange line that moves forward from 2018 represents the 2018 base wages trended forward to 2026 using the previous CPI and COLA estimates. So those in previous cycles, those are the estimates that we've used for the CPI or COLA. The purple line represents the 2021 wages trended forward using the same mix of CPI and COLA. You'll see that they parallel each other, but they're offset slightly based on the fluctuations in the wage there in 2021. The green line shows the 2023 wages trended forward using the CPI estimate that I just mentioned, that we just discussed, the 6.47% total. So you'll see a sharp increase in the purple and orange lines between 2023 and 2024, and that represents 3 separate 4% COLAs. There was the 2024 COLA, and then the 25 and 26 COLAs were moved forward to the second half of 24. And so that represents a total of a 12% increase over that year. That's why there's that sharp movement upwards between 23 and 24. Rebasing the wages to 2023 in this case would be a decrease in the estimated wages. And it's not because we believe the wages they haven't fallen since 2021. It's just that we don't expect that inflation over this recent couple of years to be 12%. So the overall number comes in lower on the forecasted value for 2026. Now, these exact values will vary from service to service depending on the occupation code, the percentile, and the region, but many of them show the similar pattern with variation, but many of them show this pattern. There is a tape, yes, sorry, you can go on to the next slide. There's a table for all the services in the appendix showing the relative wage change. That is, compared to the 2018 or 2021 wages trended to 26, what would be the wage change in 26 if we rebase to the 23 data, the Bureau of Labor Statistics 23 data. So that all of those numbers are in the appendix if you want to review them. Overall, the change is mostly downward, as I mentioned. Only a couple, there are a couple that are positive, but the downward readjustment was, it was generally larger in the geographic differential region. You know, it doesn't actually make sense to average over all these services, but just to give you a flavor for what you'll see in the appendix, the average was about negative 9.5% in the geographic differential. And for the rest of the state, the average decrease was only negative 5.3%. However, and we want to make this point very clear, there hasn't been any final decisions on the rate model, particularly the funding level for each rate. So what we've done is we've looked at the impact of rebasing the wages to the most recent wage data, and we've seen that the wage estimates will be smaller than we had previously forecasted in previous cycles. So that's the information that I'm sharing with you, but no decision has been made yet on the final rates or the rate model. With that, I'll turn it over to Kristen from Hilltop. So that'd be next slide.
Is now a good time to ask questions, or are we waiting until the presentation is done?
I'll defer to DDA.
You can ask a question on this segment, Karen.
Okay. So I completely follow what's being said. What I don't have in front of me, and I'm down to one screen today, so I can't be looking it up while we're talking. What is the base rate used in the July 1st fiscal year? So in FY 25, what is that base rate in comparison to what was just shared with us?
It is the 2018 and 2021. So it is those purple and orange lines on that graph that I showed.
But you had shown it out until 26.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is what's the number in comparison? I want to compare what the 2025 is versus the rebased 2025 versus the 2025 for 18, because that's 18 is what we're currently using, as I understand.
Yes, so we're currently using 2018. We did not rebase for 2025. We're discussing the rebase for 2026.
Okay.
So
what is the 2025 base rate?
Yeah, it would depend on the particular service, but each service.
Let's just pick one.
So to go to the table in the appendix, if we picked, I'm scrolling down, say the first one in that table, which would be on page 34 if you have it, but community living enhanced, which on page 34. Community living enhanced, it's negative 8.1% below for the rest of state and negative 13.7%. Now this is the wage, not the rate, but the wage estimate would be negative 8%. And I don't know that, I don't have the dollar number in front of me, but this is the relative change when we rebase.
Not when you rebase, because you're not rebasing in 2025.
Yeah, so the wages, the base wages are have been determined and set, and that we can provide a formal response. I don't have the 25 rate or wait. I'm not sure if you want the rate amount or the wage amount in front of me for 25.
I don't want the rate. I
You want
want
the
the
wage.
wage that you're using as the base rate for the brick.
Yeah, so that's in the 25 rate model. I don't know if I'll defer to DDA. They can pass forward that information offline. I don't have that in front of me.
We'll get the rate to you, Karen.
Thank you.
Caleb,
And
this is
are you anticipating without us getting into all those details and not having access to see them yet, are you anticipating that I understand that the projection is different, but are you estimating that there will be a decrease in real dollars for that base rate in the brick in 25 versus 26? Are you anticipating a decrease of that base rate?
I'm going to let Marlena or Robert answer the question as to whether there'll be a rate change for 26. I'm speaking only about the wage estimates.
Yes, Karen. So as Caleb mentioned, there have not been any final decisions on the rate models, particularly the funding level for each rate. The purpose of today's presentation on wage adjustment is to share that information with this team and what it's looking like when we compare where we are currently to the updated 20, I think it's the 22 BLS wage for those same service, so those same occupations that you see on this slide here. If you recall, during last year's cycle, there was a lot of pressure, might be too strong of a word. I just can't think of another one from this group to rebase across the board. Last year, we decided we would only limit that to meaningful day, and we said we would look to rebase for this year. So that's, hence the purpose of the exercise and this presentation before you.
I have two questions in the queue. I believe Laura was first and then Chris.
Thanks, Marlena. Yeah, I wanted to comment, one, I think similar to Chris's comment about the minimum wage, that, that the almost 12% increase that we received was really tied to minimum wage. And that has always been an issue that hasn't been considered really by the group in terms of the methodology. Although there's been discussion about it, it's not been included. So there's that issue. But the other point I guess I wanted to make is we had extensive discussion last year about whether the adjustment should be based on the rate increase versus CPI. And the Secretary Herrera Scott, who participated last year, was very clear in many conversations that the decision to adjust the wages based on the rate increase was in order to actually help get to a better wage, acknowledging the workforce issues. So if the department was to then rebase and reduce that number, it would completely reverse that decision and that goal to do what is best for this workforce and for the people we support. So I just wanted to point out that, you know, there was really extensive discussion. It wasn't just it should be rebased uniformly. There was a lot of complicated discussion about the best factors to use. So I probably, like most people, would strongly recommend that, you know, there not be a reduction in, you know, a reduction that would result in a lower wage and a lower rate, obviously.
That feedback, Laura, would definitely take it into consideration. Again, we have not made any decisions. We're just sharing with the group what the numbers are looking like as we're trending these numbers based on the data that we have. So thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Laura kind of, addressed the question in reference to the minimum wage component. And again, I just kind of reiterate what she said too, that concerning from the fact that without clarity, these numbers here could certainly be misinterpreted. This goes out to the general provider community. I think you're going to see some significant concerns with respect to that. I know that the decision, you made a very clear decision, has not been made. I would ask that maybe you conclude that statement here, somewhere, even on this page, that, this is not final, this is not a decision, this is just kind of the numbers we're seeing. And again, I think once we look at the impact that minimum wage is having on this equation, because we've got timing differences. We're looking at data from 23 in the GLS supplement. We got data from 28 and 21, or 2018, 21 projected forward for BLS. We're missing some of the things that are going in between. And I know you're aware of them and are taking them into consideration, at least I hope you are. But again, this standalone by itself would be quite scary if I'm a provider sitting there and have not been privy to the level of conversations that we've been having.
Chris, for your feedback, and to your point, if you look at slide 13, the very last bullet, we highlight that no decisions have been made. So thank you. Or with Kristen, next on the general ledger supplemental updates.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Deal with the Hilltop Institute, and I'm going to talk through the general ledger supplemental updates. Next slide, please. So DDA required all providers who received reimbursement for rehabilitation services between July 1st of 2023 and December 31st of 2023, so the first 2 quarters of fiscal 24, to submit cost data. And this was including direct service, billable and non-billable time to support the analysis of a productivity factor. Of the 107 rehabilitation providers who were required to submit the GLS template, 68 distinct providers submitted a template back to Hilltop. The goal was to receive high quality data from 80% of rehabilitation providers who were reimbursed for services during the study period. The 68 provider submissions represent 64%, falling short of achieving the goal. It is essential to note that GLS templates and data are still being reviewed to evaluate the quality of data submitted. Next slide, please. Of the 68 submissions received from rehabilitation providers and included in the total submission count, but it's important to note that there were providers who submitted blank templates back, incomplete templates, and templates that did not provide the required level of detail. Of the 68 providers who submitted a GLS template, 45 providers, or 66%, included at least some data in the productivity factor data collection table. 11 providers, or 16%, left the table blank, and 12 providers, or 18%, indicated their organization was unable to provide non-billable time and wages by the specific cost categories. The 45 providers who submitted productivity factor data represent 42% of the total day habilitation providers who received payment for services during the study period. Next slide, please. Hilltop made every effort to review templates upon submission and provide direct feedback and/or send clarifications to providers to support the goal of receiving high quality and accurate data from as many providers as possible. Day habilitation providers who received feedback and/or clarification requests from Hilltop were generally responsive and engaged with Hilltop to make corrections and resubmit as needed. Of the 68 total providers who submitted templates and the 48 providers submitted productivity factor data, we were able to provide direct feedback to 42 unique providers. A large majority of the providers who received feedback responded and provided additional information as requested. 35 providers, or 83%, resubmitted their templates with the requested updates, and Hilltop was able to make edits to an additional 10%, or 4 templates, based on discussions and follow-up interactions with providers. We did want to note that the majority of templates were submitted near or on the deadline date, making it challenging to provide specific feedback to all providers who sent a submission. We prioritized the review of templates based on those with productivity factor data, and then moving on to templates that were left blank. Over the next few weeks, Hilltop will be sending feedback to all providers who submitted a GLS template in order to give them feedback on items that can be applied to the larger general ledger template that is due in September. Additionally, during the data collection period, Hilltop met with providers one-on-one to provide technical assistance, WebEx calls. We had several phone discussions with providers to assist with getting their templates completed, and we submitted with costs placed in the accurate cost categories. There were several common questions received from providers and issues noted during the review of the templates submitted. We saw a lot of duplication of costs in both the cost categories at the top of the template, along with a productivity factor data collection table at the bottom of the tab. And we worked to try to address not duplicating those costs. We noticed that many providers included fringe benefits spread across the cost categories and not all reported in the ERE section of the template. And we also had a lot of questions on how to separate DSP time for those who provide care for multiple different services within an organization. Next slide, please. A majority of day habilitation providers who submitted templates that included productivity factor data, so this is our 45 providers, billed services in the rest of the state area rather than the geographic differential. There were a small number of providers who billed in both regions. Next slide, please. Of the 45 providers who submitted GLS templates with at least some productivity factor data, we looked at the representativeness of the total population of day habilitation service usage and day habilitation service payments. Billing data shows that payments incorporated 49% of the day habilitation provider reimbursements, so 39 million of the approximately 80 million during the study period, and were representative of 52% of day habilitation service users. So almost 3,000 out of the 5,600 unique participants. It is essential to note again that the quality of the data received is still being analyzed to determine completeness, consistency with reporting instructions, and usability. And so that ends our updates on the GLS templates for the productivity factor. We can go to the next topic of the general ledger template. Next slide, please. The general ledger template serves as the long-term data strategy for DDA to inform and support a data-driven rate review process. The general ledger template was shared with providers last May in advance of fiscal 24 to assist with aligning data collection to support the general ledger template submissions. All DDA providers are required to submit a general ledger template, including fiscal 2024 data. Templates are due no later than September 30th, 2024. We encourage providers to submit early and/or reach out for assistance, clarification, and review in advance of the due date. The Hilltop team is happy to schedule one-on-one technical assistance and respond to questions. There will be no new data elements added to the general ledger template for fiscal 24 data at this time. However, we do want to note that there is an updated version of the template and instructions posted on the DDA RWAG website. The updated version includes additional clarifications and edits based on provider feedback during the GLS template data collection efforts from rehabilitation providers. Providers should verify and ensure they are using the GL template dated May 2024 as they're completing for their fiscal 2024 submission. In addition to the updated documents, there will be 2 training and technical assistance sessions offered in June. These sessions will include an overview of the template, cost categories, services, formatting, as well as a review of the commonly asked questions and clarification follow-up issues identified during the general ledger supplemental template data collection that we just completed. We strongly encourage providers to attend the sessions. They will be recorded and posted online for future reference. Providers may submit their questions and clarifications to the Hilltop email box in advance of the training, and we'll be sure to respond and also incorporate these topics into the training. Next slide, please. This slide just serves as some key reminders and information. So note that you can reach out to the Hilltop team anytime for technical assistance, and there's our email address. All of the documents and resources are available online. So there's a link. The new documents are posted on the site, so all of the updated instructions and template are available there. There's additional training sessions scheduled for June. So we've shared the dates and the times. DDA will be following up with additional communication and links to register for those trainings. And then again, just a reminder that all the templates are due no later than September 30th. And providers are welcome to reach out early for feedback, ask questions, clarifications, even share a template for review if needed. We're happy to help. Next slide, please. Again, turn it back over to Robert for a Q&A.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, there was not consensus on making an acuity adjustment for the FY 2026 rate cycle. Instead, we want to focus on the current DDA services and policies and providing additional training opportunities for CCSs and providers. We acknowledge that, from our end, there's a gap there in making sure that providers truly understand how to account for or solve for, higher level of service needs. So those trainings will be conducted by regional office staff who are very familiar with our service definitions as well as the billing and service guidelines. They'll focus on assessed needs, enhanced services, overnight supports and overnight supervision, dedicated support hours, both 1-to-1 and 2-to-1 staff to participant supports, as well as enhanced rates. Next slide, please.
Robert, before we go on, can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
So, as I said in the last meeting, that I think the learning to use the rates is it's new for a lot of people, and how to combine them. I have gotten reports back from my colleagues that, and there's been some discussion amongst providers that while people are learning to use the system and use the different rates, that we're finding the CCSs and DDA being less flexible than originally discussed in regards to recognizing that some people have higher levels of needs, and that the system was based on the expertise from the provider as well as support from the CCS and DDA, being able to negotiate people that had more significant needs, and feeling as though some of that negotiation ability is not been available in the past probably 2 or 3 months. We've seen a change in the willingness to accept the information from providers about people with more significant support needs. I think that really has to be addressed systems wide. It's not a one-off, it's not 1 or 2 people, but we're finding that across the whole entire system, the tightening up of dialogue, and it not us as providers not being able to get the correct supports for people.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. Any other questions before we?
This is Greg. I don't have a question, but I want to reiterate what Karen just said. It's happening to us. It's happening to many of my colleagues who are saying we've been instructed to do things a certain way. And in fact, at Penmar, we have done seminars for DDA about how to do this. And now the way that we're doing it is not only being questioned, it's not being funded properly. This is a big deal. And so I just want, this is not something that can just be glossed over. We are hearing it from a lot of folks that have worked with people for many, many years, been successful, and the things that have to help them to be successful are now being taken out of their plans because they're succeeding. And we're setting people up for some really bad things. So I just want to add my voice to Karen's on this, and my guess is the rest of my colleagues on this call would add their voice to mine. This is a pretty big deal. When I hear from folks in our programs that are legitimately scared for some of the people that we're supporting, that they're not going to get the supports that they need.
Feedback, Gregory, and I will assure you that this isn't anything that we will gloss over. We are very sensitive to the participants' needs, and we'll take this back and discuss and get back to the provider industry in this regard.
I think that my question, Marlena, would be, was there a change in policy that did not get communicated out to the providers? Because it seems as though there's been a change in practice, but I don't know that there's been a change in policy. And if there has been, if we could just be alerted to it beforehand so that we could prepare our teams for that.
That's a great question, Karen. There has absolutely been no change in policy. And when DDA does change the waiver amendment, its authority itself, everyone will be informed. There has not been a change in policy at all.
There has been a change in practice, though. I think that's critical for you to integrate into the discussion.
Thank you, Karen. Robert?
Thank you, Marlena. So we're on the next slide, great. So we're, sorry, the slide 25, please, yes. So we're very excited to be hosting a series of lunch and learn sessions that will highlight current strategies, range of services. The lunch and learn sessions, as I mentioned, will be hosted by subject matter experts from our DDA regional office teams, and will focus on specific examples and strategies that they've encountered in their work as well. These will include examples and strategies related to medical and/or behavioral needs, PCP requirements, utilization of services, and Karen, correct me, what's the new term for the, I think one of the terms have changed, stacking perhaps?
It's sequencing is what Medicaid and HHS are using right now. So it's sequencing, braiding, and blending.
Great, thank you. So we'll update our nomenclature to be consistent with what CMS is using as a descriptor. So, so sequencing, braiding, blending compared to dedicated supports, enhanced rates, and overnight supports. Next slide. So these are the virtual lunch and learns and the dates for July. We will also look into August and September, as well as materials that we can post on our website that has been professionally done for both our provider and CCS communities to have access to. And registration is coming soon.
Robert, it's Chris. Just a quick question for you on, can you back up 2 slides for me to the, I guess, the agenda for those type of meetings? Yeah, we had discussed last time, and I thought the department made a commitment to make sure that there is at least an opportunity for providers to share their concerns about acuity outside of the, the process that Karen's going to be discussing. That, what are they seeing? What are we missing? What other information do we need? And not just, yes, the strategies on how to deal with acuity from a certain perspective, but also what challenges are they seeing that that we need to consider?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. When we send out the registration material, we'll be asking providers to submit some examples in advance so that we can do like some real-time case studies and show them how, the flexibilities we currently have to account for the higher level of services needed, and based on specific examples. And so we'll be sending everything out from this point on. We want to update this team here on where we are with acuity and getting those lunch and learn set up. But we'll be communicating directly with providers using our constant contacts and sending out those registration links.
I just want to comment that it's fine to train providers. A lot of providers do have this expertise, and to support what Greg said in particular, we are seeing people, and the Max and the DDA Coalition have raised this issue, are seeing people actually losing the exact items you're listing as essentially a proxy for acuity. So, again, a training is fine, but what's happening in real life is that people who've had these supports and need these supports are losing them, whether it's in the waiver, whether it's state only, whether it's self-direction or provider services. So I just want to be transparent that the training is lovely, but there is something very real happening across the state, and it is moving in the opposite direction of helping people get the supports that they need.
I'm going to use these lunch and learn sessions to learn from providers and also work with the providers, train the providers. So it won't just be one-sided, which is why we're going to be asking for specific examples. My regional office teams will be present, as well as headquarters as well, so that we can have a collaborative process during these sessions. So more to come on that.
Is there any consideration to having the CCS as part of the discussions as well?
Yeah, this training is open to providers and CCS agencies.
Just another quick practice item is that, as Laura said, and we've kind of been talking and alluding to, is that there has been a change in what people are allowed to get. One of the components that is problematic from my perspective is that it's being told verbally to people that they're not going to approve something rather than in writing. And when it's in writing, people have the ability to appeal it. But when it's verbal, there isn't a formal process. And so if DDA is going to have the practice, the new practice of taking some of these services away, it needs to be done in writing so that people can appeal them appropriately.
Karen, you're absolutely right. When those examples have been brought to my attention, every participant has a right to appeal. So we are not in the practice of talking anyone out of services. The purpose of these programs is to support individuals. We are very serious about that. And if there is a decision that results in a denial, the individual will receive appeal rights and should exercise their right to appeal. When these concerns have been brought to my attention, I've been very clear about the department's position in this regard.
Just one other thing. The other thing that's happening related to this is not only are people being told verbally, they're also being told, well, if you want to pursue this, you know, you could have a gap in services. And I know, Marlena, that's not something that DDA supports, but the reality is it's what's happening.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll certainly address it with the team. We're going to get back on track with the agenda and move on to the next slide.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank all of you for your thoughtful comments. Before we move on to public comment, does any member have any additional discussion points? Okay, Carol, yes. Carol, you're on mute.
Okay, now I'm ready. So I support what Karen, Laura, and a couple other people have said. We've seen a change in practice, if not a change in policy, in far as how this process is going, and statements to the effect that if you choose to contest this clarification, which is how it's been presented, there could be a disruption in your service. So there's a concern about people who don't understand that they do have the right to appeal, going along with something that is not good for them and their supports. But I also wanted to bring up that we've been hearing a lot from our membership that the SDS model has not been given access to the rates that were effective on January 1st, 2024, despite those rates being used to create the overall total budget allocation. This is a violation of DDA waivers and state laws that mandate parity, and DDA policies that state new, reasonable, and customary rates shall be published prior to the effective date of any rate increases. This current status hurts both providers and participants in self-directions, as the vendors who provide services to those who self-direct may not be willing to accept the rates that were effective in July of 2023 and therefore stop supporting people in self-direction. Likewise, self-direction participants are at risk of not being able to continue receiving these services. In addition, employees are being denied COLA increases, which is further straining the DSP availabilities. With the new rate that's coming in July of 2024, we're afraid that this situation is going to be exacerbated, and we feel strongly that self-direction must be given backdated access to the rate that went into effect in January, and then reasonable and customary rate documents be released prior to the 7/1/2024 rate increase as required by DDA policy. Since we no longer have an opportunity to actually meet with DDA representatives, this is the only forum available to go on record verbally that this is an issue that's affecting people, and we have stated this in writing in our communications with the administration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Carol. I will definitely follow up with you about your comments and concerns related to self-direction. The purpose of this meeting is to focus on the Rate Review Advisory Group, and that's the agenda that we will remain on. I will follow up with you in regard to SDAN separately outside of this forum.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are some questions from the public. someone asked where they can find the rates for each program service. So the rates for both fee-for-service billing and LTSS Maryland, as well as for PCIS2, are available on our website. I'll actually go out to our website and pull down the links and add them to the comment section here as well. Will DDA consider modifying service definitions to allow for more flexibilities? I'm guessing this is related to the waiver, and Marlena already addressed that process. And there's a comment about stopping the practice of denying services for clients until the acuity sessions are given. So there's been, as Marlena mentioned, no change in policy. There's been no guidance sent to agencies by the DDA instructing them otherwise. If, you know, as a participant is going through the person-centered planning process, the whole point of that is to ensure that their needs are met. And so, again, we're not here to deny services. And if services all are denied, it should be in writing, and they should get their appeal rights. So, as Marlena said, we'll go back internally, have discussions, and figure out where we need to provide clarity, be it from the CCS agencies or our own staff.
Hey, Robert, it's Chris. I know you said there's been no procedure or policy change, but the issue that Greg has brought up, that Karen reiterated, that Carol brought up, that we're all thinking is that, you know, it's across all the regions. Something had to be said or something had to be misinterpreted for it to be applied. If it's one region, one person got misinterpretation, something along those lines. But we're seeing this across all providers, and we're seeing this across all 4 regions. So I don't know if something was sent and misinterpreted, and that's, you know, been translated into a change in policy, but there's definitely been a change in policy, or at least application of a policy.
What I will say again is there has not been a change in policy, and there has not been a change in directive. We're going to move on to the next steps and get ready for adjournment. July 10th, as you all know, we've been meeting every 6 weeks, and our last meeting will be in August. Members of the public who would like to observe our meetings can register through the DDA training calendar at Constant Contact Events, and they only have to register once. They'll get reminders for each meeting via GoToMeeting. Meeting connection links will be sent 1 day and 1 hour prior to the meeting, and then meeting minutes will be made available following the meeting. If you have any questions regarding registration or would like to request accommodations, please contact Dr. Smalls at yamonjasmalls@maryland.gov. Next slide, please. And I just said this in the last slide. The next meeting will be held on Wednesday, July 10th from 12:30 to 1:45 p.m. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you. And all
Robert?
meeting, yes.
Robert, I'm sorry, were there other questions submitted that haven't been addressed?
My apologies. Robert, did I skip any questions?
Yeah, there was one related to providing clarity about what is being shown in slide 35. and whether that is a comparison before or after the trend factor is applied to the BLS wage. The second part of this, we already answered. You answered, Marlene. We'll be sending out what the a comparison of the current BLS wage and the calendar year 23 BLS wage. But if we go to slide 35.
Would you like me to answer that, Robert?
Yeah, so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a comparison after the trend is applied.
Is there a plan to continue to analyze the GLS to assess the need for productivity adjustment for day house services?
Diane, you can pick up the.
Yeah, Chris, as Kristen stated, they are currently analyzing the data. We can't make a determination yet based on the quality of the data until they've completed that analysis. But the plan is to continue to analyze that data. I put the link in the chat to DDA's rate page. You'll be able to find both the fee for service rates there as well as the PCIS2 rates. Okay, I don't see any other, there's comments, but there's outside of the scope of this meeting. So not seeing anything else. All meeting materials will be made available through the designated DDA webpage for this advisory group. This is a snapshot of what that page looks like. You can see down there in the middle, there's also a button for rates, as well as information related to LTSS Maryland, which is the system we use for fee-for-service billing. With that, Marlena, I'll turn it back over to you.
Is it possible for the panel members to get the slide deck prior to the meeting?
You know, as it's interesting because Chris brought up one of the reasons why we decided not to send the slide deck out in advance, because, you know, there's no context there, right? And so when there's that gap, we don't want providers filling in that information. I think it's important that they have the content to go along with the slide deck. However, we do send out the agenda, which closely mirrors the presentation. The only thing that would be missing are the graphs and things that really have no kind of context around them, so that folks know what it is they're receiving.
But Robert, it's very difficult for this group to prepare. It's not like it's going out to the full community. We know that there'll be more discussion, but it's made it very difficult to have discussion when you're seeing things for the first time, even if we know that there will be more explanation. It really does, between that and asking that we put something in the chat before speaking, those two things combined really make it very difficult, I think, for our REG members to be actual participants in the discussion in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and my request was for it to go to the panel prior to the meeting.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we can do is add more of what the discussion points are. And I hear you, but we've seen the slide decks fall outside of, you know, the panel and this team, and have gotten some inquiries of people seeking clarity before the meeting, before the RRAG meeting has even taken place. But let us take another look at how we do the agenda, make sure we include some discussion points there to better prepare folks for the session.
Hey, Robert, it's David. I hope you're able to hear me. And I'm speaking as a new member of the RRAG, and I'll dovetail both Laura and Donna's commentary by way of saying, even at the risk of some sanction, if I was to sort of be injudicious with respect to information that's given to me as a RRAG member, it occurs to me that my obligation in saying yes to participating is twofold. One, I got to do my homework, which means I need to be prepared for meetings, and I don't know how to prepare for meetings based only off of an agenda. And two, the process needs to be handled exactly to your point with enormous discretion, because it doesn't serve anybody very well if we allow information to go out without the context. And yet I don't know how to be an effective RRAG member without access to the information. So I hope you'll just give some thought to that element. And again, I'm offering commentary not to dogpile on the rabbit, but rather to represent a newish face on the RRAG who wants to do the work. And so I hope you'll consider it.
I concur with David.
Me as well.
Thank you. Marlena, turn it back over to you.
So thank you all again for your participation today. We will get the data that was requested out to you all immediately. Also, the slide deck is available. It has been uploaded to the website, so it's available now. And we are looking forward to this continued partnership with you all as we work through this year's rate cycle. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day. Take care.